She thought the past was buried beneath the fields of her childhood. He thought he'd left his heart behind on foreign soil. But one golden summer evening, as the harvest moon rises over the Whitaker estate, Claire and Ethan come face to face with a love that never really died. Years of silence. A single question. And a kiss that changes everything. Some truths ripen with time. And some hearts only break so they can find their way home again. Please don't forget to subscribe and comment. And press the bell icon for more interesting. The last light of summer clung to the old Whitaker estate like honey dripping from a spoon, golden and slow. Claire adjusted the strap of her sundress where it had slipped from her shoulder, the fabric whispering against her skin as she turned to face the man who had been both her greatest comfort and her sweetest torment for nearly 20 years. Ethan stood at the edge of the porch, his silhouette cutting a sharp line against the sunset, his hands tucked into the pockets of trousers that had seen better days. The fading light caught the silver at his temples, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, proof of years spent squinting into the sun, chasing stories across continents only to find himself back here, in this place, with her. They had been children together, running barefoot through these fields, stealing peaches from Old Man Denton's orchard, daring each other to swim across the pond even when the water turned their lips blue. Claire could still remember the way Ethan had looked at 16, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, ink smudged along his fingers from the poems he'd scribble in the margins of his notebooks. She'd pretended not to notice the way his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, the way his laughter always came a beat too late when she teased him, as if he were savoring the sound of her voice before joining in. Now, decades later, the air between them hummed with all the things they'd never said. "You're quiet tonight," Ethan murmured, his voice rough at the edges, the way it got when he was tired or when he'd been drinking. He lifted the glass of bourbon to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers over the rim. Claire arched a brow. "And you're not." A slow smile curled at the corner of his mouth. "Maybe I'm tired of talking." The words settled between them, waited. Claire turned her face toward the horizon, where the sky bled from gold to violet, the first stars winking into existence. The cicadas had begun their evening song, the sound rising and falling like a heartbeat. She could feel Ethan watching her, his attention a tangible thing, warm against her skin. "You never answered my question," he said after a moment. Claire didn't need to ask which one. Earlier, over dinner, he'd asked why she'd never married. She deflected with a laugh and a sip of wine, but the question had lingered, hovering between them like the fireflies that danced in the tall grass. She shrugged now, her fingers tracing the rim of her own glass. No one ever asked. Ethan made a low sound in his throat, something between disbelief and amusement. "Claire Whitaker," he said, her name a quiet accusation. "You're a terrible liar." She met his gaze then, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. There was something different about him tonight, something restless beneath his usual calm, an energy that made her pulse stutter. The porch swing creaked as he pushed to his feet, his movement slow, deliberate. He set his glass down on the railing and stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the bourbon on his breath, the faint spice of his cologne. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her bottom lip. Claire's breath caught. She should pull away. She should laugh and make some sharp remark and put distance between them before this went any further. But the warmth of his touch, the quiet hunger in his eyes, it unraveled her resolve like a loose thread. She didn't tell him to stop. Ethan's mouth found hers in the gathering dark, his kiss slow and deep, as if he had all the time in the world. Claire's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, her body arching into his as the years of restraint between them burned away in an instant. The taste of bourbon on his tongue, the scratch of his stubble against her skin, the way his hands slid down her back to press her flush against him, it was overwhelming, intoxicating. They stumbled through the screen door, laughing breathlessly as it slammed behind them. The house was dark and cool, the hardwood floors smooth beneath Claire's bare feet as Ethan backed her toward the stairs. His mouth trailed down her throat, his teeth scraping lightly over her pulse point, and she gasped, her fingers tightening in his hair. "Ethan, tell me you want this," he growled against her skin, his hands sliding under her thighs to lift her. Claire wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her up the stairs, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could feel it. "I want this," she breathed, her lips brushing his ear. "I've wanted this for years." The admission hung between them, raw and honest, and Ethan's grip on her tightened as he shouldered open the door to her bedroom. The moonlight spilled through the open window, painting silver stripes across the quilt her grandmother had stitched decades ago. Ethan laid her down gently, his hands roaming her body with a reverence that made her ache. They took their time, relearning each other in the dark. Ethan's mouth was everywhere, her collarbone, the swell of her breast, the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. Claire arched beneath him, her fingers clutching at the sheets as pleasure coiled tight in her belly. When he finally slid inside her, their shared gasp filled the room, the sound swallowed by the rustle of the curtains in the breeze. It was slow and sweet and devastating, the way they moved together, as if they were making up for all the years they'd wasted. Ethan murmured her name like a prayer, his forehead pressed to hers, his breath hot against her lips. Claire clung to him, her legs wrapped around his hips, her body trembling as the tension shattered between them. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the moonlight painting their skin in shades of blue and silver. Ethan traced idle patterns across Claire's bare shoulder, his touch featherlight. "Regrets?" he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Claire turned her face into his chest, breathing in the scent of him, warm skin and summer nights. Not a single one. And as the first birds began to sing outside the window, she knew this was where she was meant to be. In this house, in this bed, in the arms of the man who had owned her heart since they were children chasing fireflies through the dusk. The years ahead stretched before them, golden with promise. And for the first time in her life, Claire couldn't wait to see what came next. Please like, share, and comment your thoughts in comment section.